what does gutsy mean to you, my friend?
Oh gosh, just say yes to those things, not all things, by the way. Say yes to the things that matter most to you, things that are going to pull you out of your comfort zone, right? Be brave, be bold, right? Life is too short. So take the step. Like I went back to school in my late 50s to do a PhD. That's a gutsy move. I was like, and now I go, why did I do that? Because I'm learning, I'm growing. It's forcing me to get out of my comfort and really stretch my capabilities. And so do something this year that is gutsy.
Welcome to the Gutsy Podcast, the show where you learn how to own what you actually want and shift the mind junk that's been holding you back. I'm LauraAura, keynote speaker, coach, and your guide to help you get clarity, build confidence, and make the gutsy moves that change your life. Each week, I'm going to help you simplify things by teaching you how to get out of your head while stepping into action. This way you can achieve all those life shifts that you've been overthinking. Your desire, that drives you. But gutsy, that's what gets it done. You can be successful, respected, doing all the things that you thought that you wanted, and still feel completely alone. Not because you don't have people around you, but because you don't feel seen. You don't feel like you can actually exhale or say what's really going on without being filtered or managed or held together. There's a quiet isolation that can come with being the one that others rely on. And most women don't even realize how much it's costing them. In today's episode, I'm joined by Vicki Bradley, and we're digging into why so many women leaders feel this way and what actually creates real connection, not just more of that surface level crap. We talk about the difference between being surrounded by people and actually feeling supported, what it takes to build spaces where you don't have to hold it all together, and why this isn't just a nice to have, it's actually an essential. If you've been carrying more than you care to let on, yes, you, or you're feeling like the one everyone leans on, but you don't really have that space for yourself, this conversation is going to hit on a whole new level. Vicki is the founder and CEO of Women in Leadership Empowered and Chief Executive Coach at Vicki Bradley and Company. A certified executive coach and Energy Leadership Index Master Practitioner, she brings over 25 years of executive leadership experience in the retail industry across North America, including senior roles with iconic brands like Bombay, Marks & Spencer, and Holt Renfrew. Today, Vicki works with leaders and teams to cultivate conscious leadership, confidence, and strategic growth. Through Women in Leadership Empowered, she provides coaching, networking, mentorship, and skills training to help women accelerate their leadership journeys and step fully into their potential. In both Vicki's world and here on the Gutsy Podcast, you're not doing this shit alone. So let's get into it. Hello, Vicki. Welcome to the Gutsy Podcast.
Hello, hello. I'm excited to be here. Thank you, Laura, for having me.
Of course, of course. I think this is such an important topic. We're talking about connection today, especially with women, especially with women in leadership. I mean, this can be an isolating road, right? And if we don't consciously do something to change that, that only expands. So I'm kind of curious on your background. What has led you to where you are today? Tell us about Vicki.
Reader's Digest version. Well, Vicky has always, from as far back as I can remember, I've been a protector. I've been a huge advocate for women in particular. Through my corporate career, working in, a lot of retail organizations, some very iconic brands, I tended to always be the one who took up a lot of space and, was the voice that would speak for lots of people. And what year was it? 2008, I think it was. I had some pretty severe health issues, which forced me to make a different decision, which was absolutely the best thing that ever happened to me. And that's led me to where I am today. So I advocate for women on a much broader scale than I used to. And really, being a catalyst for the change and helping uncover what that invisible load is, and helping women really step into their full power by creating supportive networks, building their connections, but recognizing that, if you're out of sight, you're out of mind. And that was actually said to me years ago, Laura, from a mentor of mine when I got sick. I had sat on this board for the Retail Council of Canada, and my friend said to me, he goes, Vicki, if you're out of sight, you're out of mind. And that statement struck me probably like no other that ever has in my life. And I really became super hyper vigilant and intentional with connection. And it doesn't mean that I might reach out to you every week, but certainly keeping those connections alive. And it does take work to do that, but the reward that you get from that is so great in knowing that you have a network that surrounds you and supports you and celebrates you.
Absolutely. We were talking a little offline how this can really be an isolating road,
Yeah,
and if we
definitely.
don't consciously do something about that, the isolation expands, especially, if you're driven, if you're furthering in your career, your life circumstances shift or change. Like, I don't know. I just feel like the further you get into this journey, the easier it is to kind of be on your own.
Well, 100%. And I find that women, especially as you climb the ladder in corporate specifically, it does become very challenging because you're torn with, there's not many of us sitting at these high levels, right? And so there's this tendency, not with all, but with a lot of taking on masculine attributes just to be able to navigate, right? In what you're dealing with. And I certainly experienced this myself. Um, and I do believe that was a bit of the catalyst for why I got sick because I was so out of alignment with who I was and living in this masculinity versus allowing my femininity to be in harmony, right? Because it is a balance. And when I'm speaking to masculinity or femininity, I'm talking about all of us. We have that yin and yang, right? We all have attributes that are feminine, and all have masculine attributes. And so it's living in harmony with that so that you can show up the most authentically, true to yourself, right? Because when we're not true to ourselves, that internal connection becomes so disaligned that you don't sometimes even recognize who that person is. And I certainly went there myself, Laura. Um, and so I'm doing my PhD. And when I wrote my first paper, one of the things that I talked about was the mask that I wore and how I would go into these environments with my suit of armor on. And I had these visuals that I didn't even realize that that's what I was doing. And so when we relate that to connection, oftentimes when you show up with a different mask or you show up with that armor on, you're not allowing connection to come in. And so for me, this was like all this learning that, I was like, oh my gosh, like I didn't even realize that's what was happening in my life. And that I think was a catalyst for me to really be conscious of who I'm building connections with and why I'm building those connections. And we were talking just before we came online about some of the research I'm doing now and where, there's statistics that 7 out of 10 people have an insular mindset. And that insular mindset is focused on, I only want to be with people who look, sound, and feel like me. And that in itself is a dangerous place to go. And this is global. This is not just in North America. This is all across the world. And being insular, that's isolating, right? Then you're only hearing and seeing the same things you believe. So you're not expanding your connections, you're not expanding your perspective. So to me, that's a little bit of a scary place that we get to. And opening that lens of curiosity becomes so important, especially in today's environment.
Oh, absolutely. It can be very easy to just flow where
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And it's really, I love that word curiosity. We talk about that a lot on the Gutsy podcast, where it just opens you up to be like, what else is out there? What else could I learn? What other perspectives could I learn about? What do I not know that I need to know? It just opens things up. But I think that when you're talking about that armor, that was really coming up front and center for me with that is like, but I want to protect myself. I want to do it. I don't want to do something right. I don't want to do something wrong. I don't want to do something like I want to stay in my like safe little bubble, but that's not where anything changes.
Exactly, exactly. And I was doing my February newsletter yesterday and I was writing about this loneliness era that we're in, right? And it's very real, but we are creating that because we want to stay in what we know versus being curious. And listen, you don't have to agree with somebody else's perspective, but be open to hearing and trying to understand, seeking to learn, as you said, right? There's a lot of power in that knowledge. And even if it's one little thing that comes up that you go, I never actually thought of it that way. Like that's incredibly powerful because that opens up the people that come into your life, right? It's like that analogy of you're looking at red cars or you're interested in a red car, and now all of a sudden you see red cars everywhere, right? It's the same philosophy that when you open yourself, those connections start to happen more organically, naturally. And listen, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like everybody loves to connect because a lot of people, they consider connection like networking, right? And most people are terrified of networking or they hate it because they feel like it's salesy or superficial. And that also is a mindset shift is just get curious, right? Who might you encounter? Who might come into your life even for this second to teach us something that we're meant to take a deeper look at? Like I think about some of the people who have come into my life in the most odd odd ways, and we've been friends for 22 years now, or somebody that comes into my life just recently that has taught me a lot about myself and just how I view things. And so if we shift from it being I'm trying to sell you something and being very transactional to something that can potentially be very transformational, like there's a lot of power in that and just opening yourself to it.
Oh, for sure. And I want to come back to that because I think that there's some grit in there that we can dig into. But first, I want to go back to this concept of wearing the mask and the armor, and how you said you weren't even realizing that you were doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell us what that might look like? I would imagine that in that place you're trying to protect yourself, you're trying to hold yourself a certain way, maybe you want to be perceived a certain way. What did this mask and armor look and feel like so that whoever's listening today might be able to say, oh, that I didn't realize that maybe I'm doing that too.
Yeah, I would say that probably the biggest mask that I wore was, having to be strong, having to prove, having to know all the answers or perception that I knew all the answers because I would often be sitting in a room full of men and often much older than me. And the feeling, not that it was true, okay, so I want to be clear on that, but what was going on inside of me was, oh, they're looking at me like I'm young and I don't know what I'm talking about, or they're looking at me like, how did she get to this seat at the table? And now, when I look back on that, I know that wasn't actually true. And some of those same men that were looking at me a certain way were actually great mentors to me. But at the time, I felt like I had to defend, right? My true nature was nurturing. My true nature was how to lift others up, how to help them feel included, how to stretch them even beyond what they thought they were capable of. So, always pushing. And I did, I pushed hard in those roles. But I think the mask, and I have this great visual where it's like this face and it has three different masks around it. And when I saw that, it was like, here's who I am when I'm sitting at the table with all these men. Then here's who I am when I'm with my teams. Here's who I am when I'm at home. Why are they different?
Mm.
Why do I feel they need to be different? And you did say this. Some of that is that protective mechanism, right? I think it's also sometimes the confidence that, we go overboard to prove we're right. And I see this a lot with women executives, especially, but reality check, men do it too, right? And so we're not that different. And it really is about showing up authentically, consciously as to who you are.
So good. it I love this question of like, why do I feel like they need to be different?
Mm.
Friend, that is a journaling question. That is something to sit with, that is something to marinate with. And I might imagine that some people, especially if they're working for someone else,
Mhm.
might say, I have to be.
Yes.
I'm not allowed to be my full self. I'm not allowed to like take that mask off. And in fact, maybe it's expected that I have this mask on. What do you say to that?
Well, I would say that that is a reality for a lot of people. I would also say that most times that's an internal belief or assumption that's being made. Just like I shared, some of those men at the table who I thought were judging me, that I had to have this tough mask, this tough exterior, they became great mentors to me and really did love it when I showed up fully me, right? And so you can tell yourself that, and we all go through it. So I would A, say it's normal. But B, it is sitting with what that question and asking, why? Why do I feel like I have to be different? Now, the reality is you are going to have some organizations who believe certain things, or certain bosses that actually believe certain things. Like I once had a client say to me, she worked for one of the big four consulting firms, and she said to me that another female senior partner came to her and said, you have to change the way you dress. You need to start wearing black or navy. And this is a woman who dressed impeccable, like absolutely gorgeous. And so we had to spend time unpacking why this woman came to her and told her she needed to start dressing differently. And it was more of this woman's insecurity and belief system versus what it was about my client, right?
Mm,
And so that authenticity of showing up of who you actually are, people want to see that more today than ever. Because eventually you show up as who you really are, right? So come out of the gate and show up as you are.
yeah. I've that initial like shift can be terrifying and scary and uncertain and a whole bag of tricks with that, but I have always found that when I give myself the chance to do that, or I see my clients do this, everything gets so much easier because you're not putting on a play, you're not a character in a story anymore. Like it's just so much easier to naturally be who you are and put the magic that you have into the world. You know what I mean?
Yes.
When you're not taking up so much capacity, like putting on this persona or fitting this character, you can put that energy and that time and that effort into doing the work that you're here to do or to make the impact that you're here to make.
And Laura, that is connection,
Mm,
right? Connection comes in lots of different packages, right? And so it's understanding at the core, when you break all the mask away, you remove all of the stuff, it actually is about connection, right? How you're connecting with that person, and maybe you're not connecting with that person, and that's part of it. But it's recognizing, do I need to connect with that person? Right? I think when you were saying that, where my head went to is when people are put in situations for even networking, right?
mhm.
They put on this air of, oh, I'm this, I have this title, blah, 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 blah. This is my identity. And when you really break it down, I mean, your identity is everything about you, right? It's the vulnerability, it's the Vicki mom, Vicki partner, Vicki, CEO, Vicki, whatever. It's all of you. And all of that is how you connect with people, that authenticity. If I want to drop an F bomb, I'm in a situation like that might happen sometimes.
Yep.
Or it could be, a love fest, right? Like opening your arms up for people to get to know who you really are. And that can be scary. And so I guess where that leads me is if you're scared to be who you really are, why? Why are you scared of being who you really are? And if people don't accept you for who you really are, then, another great quote that was said to me years ago is if you can't change the people, right? And we're
Mm,
in the year of the horse. And, as you and I were talking earlier, like we did a lot of shedding in 2025. Invite those who should be in your life into your life in 2026. Don't spend the time on those who shouldn't be in your life. And I don't care what role they play, whether it's a partner, whether it's work, whether it's a friendship that has had its course, right? And that happens. And there's nothing wrong with that. We outgrow situations, people, but being true to that connection with yourself is very honoring and very powerful.
I that right there, that's where we have to start with connection, is with ourself. Because otherwise you're going to continue to conform to whatever room or container that you're in to
Yes.
be what other people want you to be. So, how do you recommend people start connecting with themselves first before we go outward, before we're going to networking stuff, before we're expanding, things outside of the house, so to speak? How do we connect with ourselves first?
Well, I mean, part of that is sitting with ourselves, right? Really understanding who we are. When I was talking about when I got sick, right? That was a big eye opener for me because my complete identity was tied up in being the president of the Bombay Furniture Company. That's who I thought I was. And when I got sick and my doctor said to me, "You're never going to work again," I was devastated. But again, it was the best thing that ever happened to me because I had to sit back and go, who am I? Really, who am I? And who do I want to be? You don't, you said this beautifully a few minutes ago. You don't have to play a role for everybody else. What's the story of you and how do you want to share that? Because it is a sharing. It's that connection with yourself first. Am I being truly in alignment with who I am? If
Mm.
it feels icky, if you're doing something, your body is talking to you. I mean, that's exactly why I got sick. My body was screaming, saying, Vicki, you are so out of touch with who you are. And it took 3 times for me to get hit over the head before I actually started to listen. And that body, your body is sacred and it is hearing. Like, what is it telling you? So I think that's part of it, Laura, is really getting in touch with what are the signals, what are the messages that are coming through. It can show up in lots of different ways. Like autoimmune disease is rampant with women because we hold all this stuff in. We play so many roles in the world. The invisible load that is being carried by women is heavy, heavy, heavy. And so it's like really stepping back and looking at why am I carrying the load? Who do I want to be? And you can be all of the things, but first and foremost, you've got to be you.
Yes, you've got to be you. And it can, I always tell people too, it's like you don't have to flip the table over overnight and change everything. I think a lot of this is building safety within yourself and familiarity. Like you said, pay attention to what your body is saying. Just start to get curious about the cues. When you go to make a decision that feels off, where do you feel that? What does that feel like? Like get to know your body's yeses versus its nos. Once you see and feel them, you cannot unsee or feel
Yes.
them. Like truly. And I think it's one of our greatest untapped superpowers
Yeah.
because we have this internal compass built in that wants us, like it's literally guiding us, but we're like, no,
Yeah.
no,
Well,
I'm
I'll
gonna
deal with
do.
that later.
Yeah, I'm that can't be right. That's probably not normal. No, people won't like that. And then your body's like,
Yeah.
I'll wait. And if you don't listen to me eventually, and you said it, you experienced it firsthand. If something is truly meant for us, it's time for a change. It's time for a pivot. If we don't listen, something will make us. And
Well, 100%.
it's a tough place to get into.
It is. And, I talk to a lot of women and a lot who have experienced health problems. And there's a common thread, no question. There is a linkage between your mental, physical, emotional, spiritual. It all comes together. And that awareness, that presence with what are the underlying messages, really paying attention to what are the whispers that you really try to shut out, but what are those whispers? Like for me now, like as soon as I start getting out of alignment, my body starts talking. And it's like, it might start out as I'm a little tired, or it can show up as something full on. Like I'll start getting like major inflammation in certain joints in my body. And it's like, oh, wow, my knee's really hurting. I'm swollen. And then it's like, okay, where am I out of alignment? Like I really do have to ask myself, what's happening right now that's creating this? And that connection with myself becomes so important. And I'm going to use the word trusting myself,
Mm.
trusting my intuition that there's something bigger that's guiding me with where I'm at or what I'm doing or who I am being at that moment. And so I have to do this step back and really ask myself, is this what I should be doing right now?
I'm going to bet that you're not lacking in ideas. In fact, you probably have the opposite problem. You probably have so many ideas that you're not sure where to focus, which ones to pursue, and which ones to let go of. And then you're by yourself a lot, so you're just ping-ponging around and things get bigger and more complicated and it gets messy, doesn't it? One of the things that the women in Auraline love the most is that they have a creative space to bounce these ideas around. We distill all that information down into something that is clear and makes sense. And then we create a simplified plan so that you know where to focus your time and your energy. This lets you create momentum, which creates opportunity, and then all of a sudden one day you're like, holy shit, this stuff is actually working. Let's start to untangle this ball of string on a clarity session. This is a 30-minute free you and me. Let's dig in to find out what your right next step is. Book your session at LauraAura.com/clarity, or you can click on the link in the show notes. Yeah, that's great. That awareness is huge. Let's shift into connection outward now. Okay. You talked about, networking feels like, salesy types of stuff. And I think a lot of women, and I see it every day in the women that I talk to, they're like, I'm craving connection.
Yes.
I'm tired of doing this alone. I just need someone else to talk to. I need people that understand. I don't have anybody that thinks the way that I do, or that I can have conversations on this level, just insert whatever reason. But a lot of them don't know where to start. Like, how do you build connection when you've been disconnected for so long?
Well, it's what you were saying a few minutes ago. It's those micro steps, right? Like it's join a coffee club, join a book club. Like there's lots of small ways you can do it, and just one person at a time, opening yourself up to them. During the pandemic, one of the things that I did, a lot of people that were in my network were like, oh my gosh, like Vicki, how do we stay connected? Right. And I was like, oh, well, I can do that. So I started doing Zoom networking calls, right? And got a lot of pushback on we hate Zoom, blah, 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 blah. Again, it's the mindset shift, right? Like, Laura, you and I are sitting here. I feel like we're sitting in your studio or in your living room having a conversation. That's the power of connection, is putting yourself fully, like I'm fully present with you. And it doesn't matter whether you're online, whether you're sitting in a room together. And it's great, don't get me wrong, it's great when you can bring people live together. But I probably grew my connections tenfold through the pandemic. People all around the world, because we were having conversations like this. And so part of it is just starting, right? It is taking that step and just starting. And if there's, well, I'll give you an example. I was at a Power of the Pitch competition, I think it was 2 months ago. And this woman, I didn't know her, never met her. We were standing at the elevator at the end of it, and she goes, oh, I really wanted to talk to that woman who organized it. And I looked at her and I went, so why aren't you? And she went, well, what do you mean? Like, I don't have anything to share that she'd be interested in. And I said, well, how do you know that? And she goes, well, like, she's so popular. And, she had these 200. I looked at her and I said, do you want to go home tonight and regret that you didn't make that connection? And she went, no. And I said, I'll stand right here and wait for you. I didn't know her from Adam. And she went, seriously? I went, yes, go meet the organizer. She walked in, she introduced herself, shook her hand, thanked her for a great event, blah, blah, blah. Now they're connected, right? Because I saw them just recently at another event and at the end of January. And so I said to her, I go, see, if you hadn't have taken that step, she goes, I know, but I just felt like I didn't have anything to say. And I said, of course you have something to say. Each of us are our own unique selves. Each of us bring our own gift, our own perspective, our own whatever you want to call it. So don't discount yourself. And that goes back to the self-trust, right? And being connected internally. So now she and I talk a little more regularly. And she was like, I'm so glad that you just pushed me to do that. So it was just that 1 second, that one moment. Take the step, right? Be curious, walk over. You don't have to, like, if you just ask a question, that gives that person an opportunity to talk about themselves. You don't even have to talk sometimes. Just be good at asking questions. So I think it's the micro moments, the micro steps that we take that enable us to build the confidence to say, I do have something to say.
Yeah.
And in her situation, I've connected her with several people, given her interest in what she wants to do in her next stage. And I said to her, like, just gathering information, learning what people have done. How did they take that step? That's all knowledge that you're acquiring to help you figure out what steps you want to take to get where you want to go. So, I mean, that's just a simple example, but I see it so often. Like I'll do workshops and I'll do classes on networking because I know it's right up there with the fear of public speaking, and it's the fear of spiders or mice. Like people are terrified to do it because they're afraid of rejection. And in my experiences, most people are delighted to talk about themselves and allow you into their circle. If they don't, then they're not the people that should be in your circle. So you move on to the next person.
Absolutely. Yeah. So much of that is it's our internal dialogue that's stopping the connection, because it's literally just this hairline moment where you either go with the thoughts of, I have nothing to say, I have nothing of value, she's on a pedestal, she's further along than me, whatever the story or the narrative there is, or who knows, that might be my new best friend.
Exactly.
I
Exactly.
mean, literally, I feel like I've connected with people literally out of thin air sometimes, where I'm like, I don't know how this happened, but I'm sure glad that it did, but you have to be open to that and say, okay, you might appear like you've got it all figured out, but let's all remember that we're all humans and we're all still figuring it out, regardless
Yes.
where we are in life or in our careers.
And it's all figure outable, right? Like,
Mhm.
I mean, I think that's so important. And also too, being models for our children, right? Like my kids look at me and they think I'm crazy because I talk to everybody. We can be standing in line at the grocery store and I'll start having a conversation with somebody and they're like, Mom, you are so weird. And I'm like, I'm actually not. I'm just like making conversation because what if no one speaks to that person all day?
Yeah.
Right? Like you don't know somebody's situation. And so why not? I was at one of the universities here in Canada back in the fall, Queen's University, and I had about 45 students that I did a whole networking connection. And it is a switch when you move from thinking of it as networking to connection. It makes a huge difference in energetically, even how you show up. I'm just curious about this person versus I have to get something from that person. You got to drop that and just think about. And so I was saying to the students, and they were fantastic, so engaging. I was like, how many of you are actually connecting with your professors? And they were like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, do you know your professors' names? Right. And some were like, yeah. Some were like, no. I'm like, why would you not know your professor? Right. Like, that's a connection. That's a person. Like, you should be connected with that person on LinkedIn, right? Because someday you're going to be in the working world and you don't know how that person might come back into your life because there's only, I mean, it's a very small world when you really think about it and how people are connected. And so I just share that because we have to be those models for our kids too on, it's okay to talk to people. And we teach them early age, don't talk to strangers, right? But yet if you don't talk to strangers, how do they become friends?
Yeah. I love that you pulled that back in around the networking and the salesy and the ooh, because I that is very relatable. In a lot of networking events, it's like, oh, what am I going to get out of this? Or how do I hook this person? Or how do I sell what I'm doing? And it's like, if you just take that expectation away and you just go in, I mean, I think curiosity is the name of the game here today. If you just go in with like, hey, I'm just really curious about this person, it just takes the pressure off. Like you said, it just takes that pressure off. So what other tips do you have around when it's either going to a networking event or, maybe it's a social or a new thing that you've never gone to or a new group or organization that you're joining that you're stepping into for the first time? How do you approach that and build connections, especially in person?
Yeah. And I love that. I think it is setting your intention before you ever even walk in. Who do I want to be? How am I going to show up as me as I meet people? Being intentional, even if you meet one person, you've made a connection, right? And I said this recently to someone. I took them to a networking event because they were very hesitant, didn't like it. And on the way, I got oh my gosh, I've got a killer headache coming on. I feel nauseous, like physically feeling ill. And I said, well, that's actually fear talking because you're nervous about what you're going to say. And I said, stop thinking about what you're going to say and just be you. Just, there's going to be, in this particular case, there was like 100 people there. I said, if you meet one person, you've done your job, right? And so it's taking a little bit of that pressure off yourself. You don't have to meet everybody in the room, just one. Just one. That's all it takes. For me personally, one of the things that I teach when I'm doing networking workshops is look around the room. Who's kind of standing off by themselves and probably feeling the same way you're feeling, right? That would be a person you would go over to and say, "Hey, what brought you here tonight?" Or, you know, how's the event going for you so far? By the way, I'm Vicki, right? I had one person who said to me, she was like, I hate networking. She goes, I'll stand in the corner and just wait for people to come to me. And I said, okay. And I said, how many other people in the room do you think are doing the same thing? And she goes, oh, I never even thought of it that way. And I said, so now you have a job. Your job is to find somebody like you and you go break the ice with them. And this was during the pandemic, actually. This woman has grown her network like you would not believe. And I'm not talking just numbers of people, I'm talking deep, genuine connections, right? And she thanks me all the time. She's like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you were on this journey with me. And she goes, I didn't know what I was missing. I didn't know what I didn't know. And I said, exactly, because she's a highly social person, but she's very private. And I'm like, but you're fantastic at being curious and asking questions. And as you ask questions, it allows both of you to get to know each other. So those would be some of the things that I would say, Laura. Um, and just giving yourself some grace that it's okay, right? Like the fear, I would say feel the fear and do it anyway, right? The fear can be there, but it can also be there to pull you out of your comfort zone and to propel you versus making you feel small.
Yeah, absolutely. Besides growing the network in numbers and, even in relationships, what else have you seen connections do for people?
Well, I mean, there's certainly, how do people talk about you, right? Um, I did this storytelling class with my mastermind groups, and the woman I had brought in, she was fantastic, amazing storyteller. And she talks about three things, right? Are you memorable, intentional, and referable? Those are three things when you're meeting people. And I love that. I think that's so powerful. And so it's what do people say about you when you're not in the room? How would they describe you? Right? People talk about me and they say, oh, Vicki's so warm. She's so caring. Like, she's been so helpful for me for blah, 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 whatever that is. Right? But it's how do people talk about you? Right? And networking and your connections can be referrals. Like when I took the job as president of the Bombay Furniture Company, it was someone in my network that came to me and said, you need to put your hand up for this job. Now, this was a long, long time ago. And I was like, oh, I'm not ready. And he said, yes, you are ready. He goes, Vicki, I've watched you for years. He goes, you are running the show. And I was like, oh, no, 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 because I was the vice president, not the president. He was like, you are ready. So I did. I put my hand up. And it was that person knowing something that was available in the marketplace, but knew me and said, I think you're the right candidate for that. So there's lots of ways your connections happen. Another one for me was 22 years ago when I was in the hospital, when I got really, really sick. I actually met my best friend in the hospital, and we have been the best of friends ever since. We traveled together. We have so many commonalities that, like, I'm not even going to get into them all. It's like spooky how many things we have that are alike. And we sometimes just, it's almost like it takes your breath when you think about, oh my gosh, like we met because we were in the hospital together, right? And it was just that serendipitous moment that the universe put us together for whatever reason, and we've been together now for 27 years. So you never know, is my point. You never know how someone is going to impact your life. Just be open to it.
Yeah.
Intentional about it.
I mean, all those opportunities are right. Like you and your best friend were put in the same room, but one or both of you took that first step
Exactly.
and said, hey, and because of that, look what, like that's what it comes back to, that moment you were talking about earlier, that very thin hairline moment where it's like, am I going to believe the inner dialogue or am I going to go for it? I mean, that to me, that's the premise of making gutsy moves.
Exactly. Love it.
Choosing to go for it in those moments, even when your brain is noisy. Vicki, this is awesome. And you absolutely are warm and inviting. And I can see why your students just like soak up all of your knowledge. So I want to make sure our listeners know where to connect with you. What's the best place to find you?
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I'm most active on LinkedIn. You can connect with me at Vicki Bradley or Women in Leadership Empowered. I have both channels that are going on LinkedIn. I'm also on Instagram, Facebook at Will Empowered. But those are the best ways. And you can certainly, we have a newsletter that comes out every month if you're interested in, just getting tips about how to navigate life. But that's a good way to stay in touch. And I love getting messages and just hearing how you're doing. Like if you're somebody who doesn't like to connect, by all means, reach out to me. I've got tips for you. I also have a webinar that I do on networking, which gives you some great tools and tips on, how to navigate networking.
Fantastic. We'll link those below. And if you're like, I'm looking for a connection, I don't know where to start, there you go. Vicki just gave you an open invitation. Connect with her first and see where that goes.
Awesome. Love it.
Vicki, I also have to know, what does gutsy mean to you, my friend?
Oh gosh, just say yes to those things. Not all things, by the way. Say yes to the things that matter most to you, things that are going to pull you out of your comfort zone, right? Be brave, be bold, right? Life is too short. So take the step. Like I went back to school in my late 50s to do a PhD. That's a gutsy move. I was like, and now I go, why did I do that? Because I'm learning, I'm growing. It's forcing me to get out of my comfort and really stretch my capabilities. And so do something this year that is gutsy. And I love your podcast, Laura. So thank you for having me on.
Oof, that part about going overboard to prove yourself. Did you feel a little called out there? Yeah. I can remember so clearly the time in my life and in my career when that was like one of the number one drivers. Like I had to prove myself. And for me, it was rooted in abandonment, like making sure that people were not going to leave. So if that's ringing true for you, if that part of the conversation was like, ooh, there's a little something there, I would encourage you to dig into that, because some of your greatest breakthroughs are on the other side of releasing your need to prove yourself to everybody else. We also talked a lot about connection today. So if we're not already connected beyond the Gutsy Podcast, come say hello. I'm on all the social platforms. You can find me using @thatLauraAura. And as always, until I see you next time, stay gutsy.